I have with me that urbane and punctilious Mr. John Hillerman from Magnum PI. But he's not here as Higgins today. He's here as his own dear self. I've had the good fortune of working with you, John, and yes. I've come to know you a little, and I'm very happy to be in that situation.
Thank you.
Would you mind telling me how you became an actor in the first place? I mean, where did you get the stimulus and the excitement that led you to give yourself over to a life as an actor?
Well, it actually happened quite by accident. I went to the University of Texas, and I majored in journalism. But I was not a serious journalism major. In fact, until I discovered acting, I wasn't very serious about anything.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then I went into the Air Force. It was during the Korean War. And I was stationed in Fort Worth, Texas, and I had a lot of time on my hands. I had one of those jobs where didn't have that much to do. So I answered a notice in the paper for a community theater production of Death of a Salesman. And I really answered the notice to meet people off the base. Believe me, had no idea I was going to become an actor.
You wanted some kind of an extension
just
of
the
your social life.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I got tired of looking at the same faces in the barracks every night, that kind of thing. So I went in and I read for the part, and it was a small part, the part of Bernard, Death of a Salesman. And I got the part, and we rehearsed for a month, and it was being performed at an old theater, very Rococo theater, and seated about 1,000 people. And I went on stage opening night, a nervous wreck, of course. And I know it sounds terribly corny, but I got on stage, and it was such a high that I realized that up to that point I had been bored my entire life.
Is that right?
True story. And from that moment on, there was no question of what I was going to do. I had 2 more years in the Air Force, and I did about 20 plays locally. And then as soon as I got discharged from the service, I went to New York and started the long, hard struggle.
What was the input to that decision to answer that audition call? Do you follow me? I mean, what kind of nourishment did you get as a child in terms of your imaginative mind?
There is nothing in my background to have indicated that I would... I was always a precocious child in that I always read a great...
You read a lot.
A great deal, and still do, of course. I guess books are my greatest pastime. But there was nothing to indicate that I was going to become an actor, nor that I had any particular talent.
Nobody around you?
No. There was no theatrical background.
Nobody at all? Not even at school?
No, nothing like that.
No memory of your family, your mother or your father?
No. It was quite startling.
Where were you born, John?
In Denison, Texas, which is a small town near Dallas, Texas.
And so life until the age of 6 or 7 was
the normal life of a small Texas town.
And what is that? Because I don't know.
Well, it's in the years when I was growing up, it was the values were very simple, very black and white. You didn't lie, cheat, or steal, or you got the hell beat out of you. And I still believe in those values. I think that there's an advantage to growing up in a small town. I have, of course, in my adult life, lived only in large cities. And I remember the simplicity of growing up in a small town as a child has its advantages. And but it was a quite ordinary life.
Do you subscribe to the view that our experience as people off stage is very important to our capacities on stage?
Yes, I think that I have always been the kind of person who in a crowd will watch the crowd. And I like... I'm a people watcher. And I think that one takes that and remembers it and uses it as an actor. I certainly do.
And so, after this very exciting experience of your debut in the theater, as it were, after which you had to fulfill your obligation in the Air Force, right? So that was by no means stepping into the theater per se. You did what? You took yourself off to New York?
I went to New York. I enrolled
to seek work as a professional actor?
Oh, yes. There was that.
Well, how did you even start?
Well, it was not easy.
But it wasn't either.
I studied at the American Theater Wing
for
a year, which is a well-known drama school in New York. And of course, I had a thick Texas accent.
Mm-hmm.
I talked like this.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no cowboy parts on Broadway. So it was either lose the accent or not work. And I was fortunate in that I met a woman at the American Theater Wing who was my voice coach.
Yeah.
And her name was Fanny Bradshaw. She was a very famous voice
What
coach.
a splendid name.
Yes, it is a splendid name. She was quite eccentric.
Yeah.
But she was really voice doctor to the stars. Any Broadway star who had a voice problem, for example, in my class, she had a private class at her house, and she asked me to attend. She felt that she could get rid of the accent. And you walk into her living room, and there would be people like Montgomery Clift and Geraldine Page and June Havoc, and they were all there for some problem they had. Jerry Page, for example, had a high voice, and she was about to do that Terence
Stamp?
The play where she plays the actress, and she wanted to lower her voice. Separate tables.
Separate tables.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she was striving to get a lower register into her voice. I was striving to lose the Texas accent.
What was Montgomery Clift struggling with?
I can't remember why he was there. He wasn't around much, but he had some problem he was trying to correct. So everyone in that, and I was the only, they were all stars. I was the only unknown actor there. But I sort of became her protege, and she felt evidently that...
And she encouraged you, that's the point.
Well, she
you're
said,
making,
she
isn't
said,
it?
you've got to lose the accent if you want, if you're serious about a stage career, and of course she was right.
Yeah.
So it took about a year
Yeah.
to lose the accent. And then I started doing summer stock and that sort of thing. And
Did you
finally,
make contacts while you were still at school? I mean, is that when you began to kind of...
well, you make tentative contacts, but it's so, as you know, Terry, a life of an actor is perpetually looking for work.
Yes.
I mean, that's what we do. We act about 2 months of the year and spend the rest of the time looking for work, unless you are in the incredibly fortunate position that I find myself in now, of being in a television series where I am gainfully employed 8 months of the year, and finally make enough money that I don't have to look for work when I'm off.
There's one other big difference too, I think, John, although it may be changing, and that is in Europe, and most certainly in Britain, you have these wonderful standing companies, right? Repertory companies dotted around the country, and standing companies in London, such as the Royal Shakespeare Company, the National Theatre, and so on and so forth, who engage actors over a long term. You know?
Well, we have that here too.
Now, America does begin to have them, right? But
yes. Well, I was on the stage for 15 years, from until 1969, from 55 to 69, around there. And it was during that time that I was a stage actor when the regional theaters really came into their own. I opened the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park and worked there a few seasons. I ended my stage career with 4 years with a theater in Washington, D.C. So there was employment in that sense. But it was still not the big time, you know.
Right.
It was not Broadway.
But it was your apprenticeship.
It was your
wasn't it?
apprenticeship, and it was a wonderful training ground. And one really learned, you know, you're performing a play during the day, you're rehearsing a play during the day and performing at night, and you learn an awful lot about acting.
What sort of things did you, in fact, get an opportunity to play? Everything?
Everything.
From Shakespeare to
from
Neil
Shakespeare
Simon?
to Tennessee Williams, as a matter of fact. I did over 100 leading roles on the stage before I moved to Hollywood. And literally everything. Edward Albee, Tennessee Williams, Shakespeare, UNESCO.
Did you meet some exciting fellow players or directors who help you to begin to formulate your own self as an actor? Do you follow me?
Well,
I mean, when you're studying at school, you're still an infant, aren't you?
You are that.
Do you
but
understand
that's true, I was that. But I always had a very strong image of what I wanted to do as an actor. I didn't do a lot of thumping around like a lot of actors do. From the moment I discovered it, I had a very strong inner impression of what I wanted to be, or what I wanted to appear to be to an audience. And I had early on developed a style which is underplaying, which has held me in good stead for the camera. And many times the directors would want me to do something bigger with a scene, and I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. So I was always known for underplaying the scenes. And that, of course, made my transition to film easy, because, as you know, I know a lot of stage actors who are quite good on stage, but don't work on film because it's too large. The camera's So
Underplay is generally regarded as the hallmark of comedy, isn't it? Of good comedy.
Oh, absolutely.
In particular. Yeah.
I think so. I am noted now, of course, for doing that kind of comedy.
Right.
Very underplayed, no coward-esque, throw away the lines kind of thing. And I'm very comfortable with that.
Does that make you a rarity among American
I think
actors?
so. I don't. There aren't many. I can't offhand recall an actor who does quite the kind of comedy that I do in the style that I do.
Sure. American actors are generally not credited with the kind of comedy of manners or
no, not generally.
A cool understatement such as you require for many kinds of European acting.
I am compared frequently to people like Clifton Webb and William Powell, and God knows that places me in great company.
Yes, yeah.
But people tend to compare my style to Clifton Webb and William Powell.
And I can readily see that. Yeah? I mean, obviously...
Because they both, of course, were masters of underplaying.
Now, John, tell me, how did your acquaintance with good plays come about? I mean, you spent a year at the school, right, at the theatre wing, as it were.
And by the way, the reason I didn't stay longer at the theatre wing is because I had, first of all, been doing some acting on the stage, and I didn't feel that I was learning anything. I had pretty much figured out what it took to be an actor. So I was not heavily into a lot of training and that sort of thing.
You kind of knew yourself pretty well by the time you went to that school.
Yes, I really had a very strong image of what I wanted to do. It was never I always had great confidence as an actor. The secret is convincing other people that you're good.
Would you go so far as to say that maybe far too many people attempt to become actors too early in life before they have any understanding of the realities of life and before they've had the corners knocked off their own psyches?
I think that's an awfully good question. I know that young actors tend, I see it all the time, young actors always do too much, and it takes a while to learn the craft enough to know that less is more. And the simpler the performance, the more believable, and in fact, the more interesting it's going to be. And young actors always try to bring too many things to the performance, and it becomes too busy and too muddied, and there's no focus. I think part of that, of course, is self-confidence. Part of it is learning the craft of acting. But part of it is indeed having had some life experience to back you up. I mean, the thing is that when you're an actor, you're assigned the task of creating reality out of fiction.
Right.
That is not the easiest task in the world.
No. Do you know and do you like Olivier's adage that the act of self-persuading the act of self-persuading in order to persuade?
That's wonderful.
That's the only thing he's ever said in so many words about the art of acting, because he refuses to talk about it.
Yes.
And the mystery of acting.
Yes.
And in spite of my questions to you, would you basically agree with that there is a kind of an internal mystery about it, and
you
can't tamper with it, or you shouldn't tamper with it?
Well, I'm very inarticulate when it comes to talking about the mechanics of acting myself. I don't have any complicated technique that I use. I've always been an intuitive actor. I find, generally speaking, that if the scene is going well, that means it's been well written, and if it's not going, given the presumption that you've been cast properly, if the scene is going well, then it's well written. If it's not going well, it means the damn scene isn't well written.
So you would understand what Dame Edith Evans said once when she was asked to do something by a director, and she simply said, yes, dear, yes, I'll leave it in the oven a little longer.
Yes.
That's all she felt able or wanted to say about her craft and her style. Yeah?
If I'm comfortable, then I know the performance is good. And if I'm uncomfortable, then something is wrong. Either the direction is wrong or I'm misinterpreting it. I love, speaking of quotes, quoting actors, I love Ralph Richardson's quote. He says, acting is a 2-hour struggle to keep the audience from coughing.
And the other lovely one where he said, 8 o'clock is the time to dream, which was the other side of his nature, because that man really had, one feels, a deep mystic streak to him.
Yes.
Do you think that actors in that sense have to be all things to all men? Is it necessary for us to be able to respond to...
I think that good actors are are people
What
who
are we, John? Are we chameleons? Are we
I think we are, and I think that
shallow, hollow creatures?
No,
Are
I
we
don't think we're.
reflecting
I don't think we're
mirrors? What are
shallow,
we?
hollow. Alfred Hitchcock once said, I think in a derogatory way, that all actors are children. And my reply to that is, yes, indeed we are, and thank God for it. If we were not children who lived deeply in fantasy, and I'm not saying that I live in fantasy when I get up and brush my teeth. When I get up and brush my teeth, I'm John Hillerman brushing his teeth. But if I'm doing a performance, then of course I'm immersed in the fantasy that I have to create the reality. So, I know it's a contradiction in terms, but that's what it is. But I think I think that all good actors are chameleons. What we do is live a person other than ourselves.
Yes. There's a nice
And that's one of the
distinction.
nice things about being an actor.
Absolutely.
If you get bored with yourself, you can be somebody else for a while.
The distinction between being childish and childlike, I
Yes.
think, is very important.
Yes,
don't you?
yes, I think so.
And again, Larry once said, how wonderful to be a train driver one day, a cardinal the next, and a child molester the next, and be
Yeah.
paid for doing it.
To be paid for doing it. I know.
In other
I
words,
know,
an
that's true.
investigation of our own humanity, right?
Well, the thing about, I like actors. I find generally, and I've met literally, God, thousands, I guess, in the course of my 32 years as an actor. And they're generally nice and interesting people, and usually with broad interests. There's a cliche that actors can only talk about acting, but it's not really true. And I think that good acting requires a kind of liberal, broad approach to life, to be able to understand many kinds of people, many kinds of problems and situations.
Who's the most exciting, or one of the most exciting actors that you have come across in your professional life?
Do you mean to work with?
Either to work with or who's worked
Well,
with?
I could never admit to a single person, but the people that impress me over and over again, and will all my life, I'm sure, are Peter O'Toole, for example, who I think is an absolutely brilliant actor with an incredible range of accomplishment.
Is it his personality in part, too, that you find so delightful?
The personality is fascinating, and I think that's true of all actors who are really
He's outrageous,
exciting.
Peter, isn't he? That's one of his great
He's outrageous,
charms.
but he's outrageous in the very best sense of that
And
word.
he's very vulnerable at the same
Yes.
time, one feels,
Yes.
yeah?
And I love people like Alec Guinness and Laurence Olivier and Gielgud and of course the great American stars, Bette Davis, Humphrey Bogart, Edward G. Robinson. My God,
I've
the
heard
list
it
goes
said time
on.
and time again that maybe Spencer Tracy
Spencer
was
Tracy.
one of the greatest actors in the world,
Absolutely.
in fact, right? He was able to do things
Wonderful film actor.
in the studios and repeat them, right, at will.
And again, he had no technique. He said acting is standing up and saying the lines and trying not to bump into the furniture. And that was all he would say about it.
Like Dame Edith, right? He
Yes,
refused
absolutely
to
no technique,
reveal-
or refused to
Yes,
reveal any.
yes.
Montgomery Clift was a definitive film actor.
Yes.
God rest his soul.
There is a distinction, is there, in terms of skills and techniques between the two, between the theater actor and the
Oh, absolutely.
camera actor, let's call
Well,
it.
you have the situation on stage. Let's say you have a 1,000-seat theater, which is not that big, and you're doing an intimate love scene, and you've got to be heard in the last row in the house. Well, somehow, you're not really whispering and making love. You're pumping up your diaphragm to get the words out, and you're still trying to make it seem like a love scene. Now, that is not an easy task. But the camera is the exact opposite. It sees every tiny bat of the eyelash. And the smaller you make it, the better, the more believable. And you can't, now I have on stage, I'm sure that any actor, if he will be honest, will admit that he has faked it on stage in a scene or a performance when you're not feeling well and you don't have the inner energy, whatever. You can fake it on stage. You cannot fake it for the camera. At least I don't think you can. It's too.
Well, maybe
that
it's
eye
just
is too.
it's a question not necessarily of sincerity. I mean, you're not doubting the stage
No, I'm
actor's
not saying-
sincerity, are you?
but-
a question of style. For example, if one thinks of Elizabethan miniatures, you know, on ivory this
Yes.
size, and yet the distillation of a personality so complete, and then on the other hand, say, a Rembrandt self-portrait.
Yes.
Do you follow me? 3 or
Yes.
4 feet high. Do you think that analogy is fair?
I think it's
a
a fair
question
analogy.
of projection and
I think
coloration.
I think it's a fair analogy. I find, quite frankly, that I prefer working for the
You
camera.
like being a miniaturist in that
I
sense,
love it,
right?
because
Yeah.
you can, the detail is so great.
Yes.
I don't miss the stage at all. I haven't been on the stage in 15 years.
Would you be content with the thought of continuing to work in front of the camera for the rest of your life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
I hope to do so.
What sort of things would you like to do over and above what you have already accomplished as a camera?
Well, I would always want to have a television series because I like working with the same people every day.
Yes.
In a sense, it's like repertory theater.
Yeah, a sense of family, a sense of the ensemble, people
Family
you can
ensemble.
trust,
I mean, everyone raves about the chemistry between Tom and me and Magnum.
Yeah.
That's because we've been working together for 5 years.
Yes.
We know each other's rhythms so well, and we can rehearse a scene for 5 minutes, and it's just pure gold comes
Yes.
out of it.
And
Well,
you trust each other.
and we
don't you?
oh, absolutely.
Implicitly, yeah.
And that is great fun.
Yes.
It's very stimulating to do
Yeah.
that. So I like doing television series. When Magnum is over, I would
Yes.
indeed seek another one. Beyond that, I like doing a good motion picture when one
Yeah.
comes along.
John, you once said to me that you would like to do one of the Coward plays. Do you remember?
Yeah, I'd love to do...
President Laughter.
I'd like
wasn't
to do... No, I wanted to do Blythe's Spirit.
Ah, Blind Spirit.
For the camera, and I
Yes.
think it would make a
In other words, take
fun
the,
thing.
the stage play and give it a camera treatment,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
And bring it all down to the kind of delightful, small, detailed, intimate work that you've been
Precisely.
referring to, right?
I hope to do that someday, like for HBO or
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
things. It would be... I have done that play, and I particularly enjoy my performance in
Yes,
that.
yes,
So I'd like
yes.
to do it again.
Yes. What other kind of theatre do you enjoy going to watch, John? Do you like the opera, for example?
Oh, yes, I like opera very much.
Now that's big, 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 right?
Yes,
I
always ignore the acting. I just say, you know,
No, that's a
forget.
bit mean. I mean, people like Domingo and
No,
Robbie start
some
have
of them
given stunning performances.
Some of them are
Cheryl
great.
Jones.
Some of them give great performances, but as you know, a lot of
Yes.
them do not.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
But I go for the music and the extravagance of it all.
I've always thought it was very unfair that in opera and in ballet you have this gorgeous undertow of music which so excites the audience, right?
Yes.
That they cheer and rave, I mean, especially at ballet, and we poor speaking actors, as it were, have to be content with just good applause.
I
and-
know.
I mean,
I know.
And it's the music that does it all,
Oh,
isn't
the
it?
music. If only we could score the plays, it would be wonderful. But
So
I love
music's an
it.
important part of your life, I'm sorry.
Music is a very important part of my life. I'm a long hair. I don't listen to anything later than Brahms,
Yes,
but
yes.
I do like music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very romantic, isn't it?
Brahms? Perhaps. I guess I'm a bit of a romantic.
Yes, yes.
And in terms of plays, I like good... the last play I saw which excited me was Amadeus.
Yes.
That was a wonderful play. I saw it in New York with Frank Langella. He was absolutely brilliant in it, and it was just an exciting play.
Do you like
enjoyed
the
it.
liberties that Peter Schaffer took with the personalities of Mozart and Salieri in order to create that dynamic and that confrontation?
I love the play. It was fun.
John, after this season finishes, you're off to London, aren't you? Is
Yes,
that
we're
your-
doing a 2-hour Magnum for the opening of next season in London. It'll be the first time that they've allowed us off the island. So we're terribly excited about it. I'll be there for the whole month. And I've been to London before once briefly, and I really fell in love with it.
Would you enjoy it all the more as the, quote, complete Englishman, unquote, that you have proven yourself to be?
Well, the strange thing about Magnum and Higgins and all of that, I was in London about 3 summers ago. And first of all, I get fan mail from England saying you're a credit to Great Britain.
I'm sure you do.
All the time.
They'll make you an honorary citizen if you're
Oh,
not
absolutely.
careful.
And when I was in London, people would come up to me on the street and say, "We are so proud of you." And I'd say, "Well, you know, I'm not really English. I'm from Texas." And they say, "Oh, you're putting us on, love." I'm in the peculiar position of being a man who tells the truth, and they think that I'm lying.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's an extraordinary experience to go to travel abroad. We're in 75 foreign countries. And somehow you expect to be anonymous when you leave your own country.
Did you ever in your wildest dreams contemplate this kind of, I'll use the word celebrity because it kind of covers the case, right?
Yes.
I'm not sure that I like the word very much.
Yeah.
Did you, John?
Well, yes, I always intended to be rich and famous.
Did you?
Oh, yes. That to me is part of being a successful
Yes,
actor because, you see, you only have, you only have two ways to go as an actor. You can be obscure, and you get little parts for no pay, or you can become, quotes, famous, a famous face, which is what they buy after all.
Yes.
And you get the big parts and get paid a lot of money. And I don't see very much in between. So yes, I intended from the very beginning to become as big a star as I could possibly manage. That to me was part of the whole thing, beyond the thrill of acting, beyond the satisfaction that I get as a performer. Of course, I want to be rich and famous.
It calls for tremendous energy and spirit of personality too, doesn't it? I mean, you are drawing on enormous psychic reserves in addition to those that you use.
You are
as a
indeed, and
performer,
as you
right?
become more successful, the demands on you become far greater than anything I imagined.
Yes.
I was not quite prepared for all of the pressures that come to bear when you become a very famous actor. It's quite extraordinary. The people come at you from all sides.
And then you go away to a quiet corner sometimes with a book and forget all of that.
Oh, I do. I live in a penthouse that is isolated, and I can turn off the phones, and sometimes I do so for days.
Yes,
So.
yes. Yeah. John, it's been a great delight to speak with you, and I thank you very much for revealing those parts of you that most people would never know about otherwise.
Well, thank you. I must also tell you that I'm a great admirer of you as an actor. I've enjoyed working with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that's a compliment indeed, yes. And so, John Hillerman, thank you very much.